Hey guys, it's Miss Delcambre. So here is a rundown for lesson 9.2, fraction decimal percent. So you need your journal, your notes on 9.2, glue, and a pencil, and scissors also, because we're going to cut our notes apart and do two different sections. Okay, so here we go. All right, as you see, I've taken my 9.2 notes. I've cut it down here in the middle, put this on my left page, and on my right page, I put the other half. Okay, so we're going to talk about writing percents as decimals and fractions because percents, fractions, and decimals are all equivalent forms of the ratio, just showing different ways to represent it. Okay, so the notes say you can write a percent as an equivalent fraction or as an equivalent decimal. Equivalent percents, decimals, and fractions all represent equal parts of the same whole. So here in questions number 1 through 6, it says, write each percent as a fraction and as a decimal. Well, we all know that percents are ratios out of 100. So we take the number, so we'll take 15 and we'll write it over 100. Well, there we have our fraction, but it's not in simplest form. Let me zoom in a little, guys. There we go. Okay, so we have to think, well, what number goes into both 15 and 100? Well, real quick down here, we're going to talk about the factors that make up 100. Okay, so I'm making a quick little T-chart. So I have 100. Well, 1 and 100 make up 100, but that doesn't change anything. That doesn't simplify. So my first number would be 2, and 2 times 50 gives me 100. Okay, 3, nothing times 3 gives me 100, but 4 times 25 gives me 100. Then we have 5. 5 times 20 gives me 100. And 10 times 10 gives me 100. Okay, so those are your factors that make up 100. Real quick, I want to do one more. I want to do 1,000. And all these numbers make up 1,000, but there's also 8 and 125. Okay, so that's just one that you may encounter as something into the thousands so that you can remember, well, all of these work up here plus 8 and 125. So let's go back to 15 over 100. Well, if I'm looking at my factors, 5 is the largest factor that can both go into 15 and 100. So I'm going to divide them both by 5. And I get 3 over 20. So that's what it would be as a fraction. Now, as a decimal, I'm just moving my percentage symbol over 2 times the left, and it would be 15 hundredths. 15 hundredths is what it would look like. Okay, looking at number 2, I have 48 hundredths. Well, that would be 48 over 100. Okay, if I look at my numbers, that can both go into 100. My factors of 100, 2, 4, 5, 10. Well, 2 works, but 4 is actually the number I will use because it's larger than 2. So I'm going to divide them both by 4 because 4 can go into 48 12 times and 4 can go into 100 25 times. So my answer would be 12 25ths, which would be my fraction in simplest form, and the decimal would be 48 hundredths. You see 48 hundredths, 48 hundredths. Basically, I'm taking my decimal, I'm looking at my fraction and writing it with the place value of the tens and hundreds spot. Okay, next one, number 3. I have 80%, which is 80 over 100. Okay. Oh, I can take a 10 out, but there's also a larger number. 20 can both go into 80 and 100. So I'm going to divide them both by 20. And I get 4 over 5. I get 4/5. Okay. So that would be my fraction. My decimal, well, it's 80 hundredths. So 80 would go right 80 and then have the 0 in the hundredth spot. Okay, number 4, 75 hundredths. So that's 75 over 100 is how I would write that 75%. 5 would be a number I can take out. However, I know that 3/4 equals 75 cents, and 75 cents values were 25 cents. So I can divide them both by 25, which gives me 3/4, which is 3/4, which is a simplified fraction of 75 hundredths. And 75 hundredths, I would write that as a decimal, 0.75, 75 hundredths. Number 5, so we have 36%, which would be 36 over 100. Well, I know that they're both even, so I can take out a 2. However, I can also take out a 4, and I'm going to take out a 4 because it's the larger of the 2. So I'm going to take out, divide it by 4, divide it by 4. 36 divided by 4 gives me 9. 100 divided by 4 gives me 25. So my fraction equivalent to 36% is 9/25. It's 9/25. And 36%, which is 36 hundredths, which is 36 hundredths as a decimal. Okay, 36 in the hundredth spot. That 6 goes in the hundredth spot. Finally, number 6, well, 40% is the same as saying 40 over 100. Okay, I want to simplify that. So I'm looking at my numbers here. Well, I have 40. Well, 2 can go into it, 4 can go into it, 10 can go into it, but 20 is a key number because it's the largest factor that can go into both of them. So I'm going to divide by 20, divide by 20, and 20 can go into 42 times, and 20 can go into 105 times. So my simplified fraction would be 2/5. Okay, and my decimal, 40 hundredths, how I would write that is 0.40, 40 hundredths. Now, there is a trick I'm going to show you about my FDP triangle. So I'm going to zoom out for a second, and we're going to use this section right here, and we're going to draw a large triangle. So I'm going to grab another color real quick. Grab this purple. And I'm going to make a large triangle. Kind of make it an isosceles, meaning that 2 sides are the same length and one is not. So that is my large isosceles triangle. Let me try to zoom out a little more. All right, so there's my sad attempt of an isosceles triangle. Okay, so at the vertex, at the tip of each one of these, I want you to do, up here, I want you to put a decimal and a D. In the bottom left corner, we're going to write a fraction, and I write my fractions as N over D, so I know that that's numerator over denominator. And then in the right corner, I'm going to put a percentage symbol. Okay, so this triangle is basically a flow chart to go from fraction to decimal, decimal to percent, fraction to percent, percent to decimal, and so forth. Okay, so the easiest way to go through this triangle is first going through your decimal to your percent. So go from a decimal to a percent. So I'm going to draw an arrow from decimal to percent. Is all we have to do is move it. Move it, move it, move it. Move the decimal 2 spots or 2 times. And we're going to go in the right direction. And then we're going to put a percentage sign. So we're going to move it 2 times. So if you look from a decimal to this percent, we're just moving this decimal 2 times to the right, and you get 40%. So 1, 2, because percents are of 100. 2 place values, 1, 2, 1, 2. There we go. Okay, now if we go move the decimal 2 times to the right to go from decimal to percent, we're going to go the opposite way, which we're going to go from a percent to decimal. So I'm going to go inside my triangle, and I'm going to draw my poorly drawn arrow, and we're going to move 2 times to the left. And put a decimal. I'm going to put a big old dot right there for a decimal. Move 2 times to the left and put a decimal. So if I'm going from 40% and I want to know, I'm going to take that by that percentage symbol. Or if you have a percentage symbol that has a decimal in it, you're going to move it 2 times to the left, and you're going to put your decimal. So what I was saying is if I have 12.5%, okay, 12.5% already has a decimal in it. So you don't go here, you go here where this decimal is, and you move it 2 times to the left, 1, 2, boom, boom, and I'm left with 125 thousandths. So going from decimals to percents, guys, all you have to do is move it. Move that decimal, move that percentage symbol. Add the decimal, then add the percentage symbol. All right, so that one is the easy one to do. I always find it's the easy one because all you're doing is moving things, not a whole lot of math involved. Okay, now let's go to the bottom part. When we go from a percent to a fraction. So I'm going to go draw a little arrow right there. And when we're going to go from a percent to a fraction, that's how we've been doing it up here, up at the top. So what we did, we would set it up over 100, set up over 100, set up, oh, I forgot, let's put percent right there, percent over 100, and then you simplify. Okay, and that's how we did it up here. We did 36 over 100, and then we simplified, meaning we reduced. We did 80 over 100, and then we simplified. Now remember, not all the time it's going to simplify, so we've got to remember that. We've got to remember that. Okay, so we went from decimal to percent, percent to decimal, percent to fraction. Now we're going to do the one that goes from decimal to fraction. So if I'm going to go decimal to fraction, so I'm going to draw an arrow on the inside going from decimal to fraction. Basically, you put your decimal over your place value. Put over place value. And simplify. All right, so let's look at 36 hundredths. All right, so 36 hundredths. Well, that's in the hundredth spot, so I know I'm going to have a denominator of 100. So that would be 36 over 100. And then I would simplify that by dividing both of them by 4, which gives me 9 over 25. So I'll look at the place value of the last number there and put that as a denominator, and then simplify. Okay. Now, from a fraction to a decimal is my last one I'm going to do. And this requires, you can do it 2 ways to go from a fraction to a decimal. So my first way is get the denominator to 100. So if you can get your denominator to 100, then you think of place value. Okay, that's one way to do it. All right, the second one, which is, I'm going to put a star, this is a foolproof way. Not every time you're going to get a denominator that's going to get you to 100. Okay? You may get 4 sevenths. And a seventh you cannot change into 100. You may get 3 over 8. No, 3 over 6. There's no way I can get 6 into 100. So in those times where you cannot get your denominator to 100, you always want to use that trusty tie bow method. And remember, always with tie bow, your numerator is inside, your denominator is on the outside. Top in, bottom out. And then you're going to make sure you put your decimal there and start doing your math and your division there. Okay? So this is kind of like a trusty little flow graph. So when you start going from percents, fractions, and decimals and all that, you can always refer back to this because this is kind of like a foolproof way of remembering. You don't have to remember any rules. You can just look and go, oh, I've got to move my decimal. Oh, I've got to set it up over 100 and simplify. Okay, let's go to our next page real quick. So you can write some fractions. I'm going to zoom in so you can see. You can write some fractions as a percent by writing an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. This method is useful when the fraction has a denominator that's a factor or a multiple of 100. And we looked over those numbers. Okay, if a fraction does not have a denominator of 100, denominator that's a factor or multiple of 100, you can use long division. Okay, so right up here you have some room. We're going to rewrite those numbers again that were factors of 100. So that was like 2 and 50, 4 and 25. I ran out of room there. 5 and 20, and 10 and 10. Ran out of room there, but you see them. Okay, so now we have 9 25ths. Okay, so what they were talking about is, okay, 9 25ths, I need to make that as a denominator of 100. Okay, so, well, how do I change a 25 into 100? Well, I looked up there. If I multiply it by 4, 25 times 4 gives me 100. If I do to the one, I must do to the other. 9 times 4 gives me 36. So it would be 36 over 100. Anything over 100, that's that percent. So it would be 36%. And as a decimal, 36 hundredths, think about place value. 36, that 6 is in the hundredth spot. So 9 25ths is 36% and 36 hundredths. All right. The other one that it did, I'm going to do right here, 7 eighths. All right, so that's 7 eighths. 8 can't go into 100. I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this. Okay, but remember I showed you that 8 can go into 1,000. So I can make this have a denominator of 1,000. So 8 times 125 gives me 1,000. Well, if I multiply the bottom by 125, I must multiply the top by 125. And 7 times 125 gives me 875. And I'm going to write this as a decimal first, which is equal to my decimal, 875,000. So I need 3 place values, 1, 2, 3. So it's 875 thousandths, 0.875. Now, to go to a percent, I need to move this decimal 2 times. Just because there's 3 numbers, don't get ahead of yourself and go, I'm going to move it 3. Move it 2. It's always move 2. So I move 1, 2. So then I get 87.5%. Okay, so my answer, what's equivalent to 7 eighths, is 875 thousandths. There's my decimal, and my percent would be 87.5%. Okay, so that is 7 eighths. So that's 87.5% and 0.875. Now, if you forgot about this and you're like, oh, I don't know, 8 times what gives me 1,000? Remember I showed you that trusty method was tie bow, top in, bottom out. So I'm going to still go over here, 7/8. Okay, so top in, 7 in, bottom out, 8 out. So I'm going to put a decimal and throw some zeros behind it. So 8 can't go into 7, so I'm going to bring that decimal up and put a 0 there. But 8 can go into 70. Okay, so 8 times 8, 64, because 2 little 8s sitting on the floor playing Nintendo 64. That's how I remember. 8 times 8 is 64. Subtract, I'm left with 6. 6 is smaller than 8, so I got it right. Bring down my 0. 8 can go into 60. Well, that's 7 because 5, 6, 7, 8. 7 times 8 is 56. 60 minus 56 gives me 4. 4 is smaller than 8, so I know that that number is correct. Bring down my last 0. 8 can go into 4 exactly 5 times. And I'm left with 875 thousandths. And do you see that these two are exactly the same? And then I'll just move my decimal over. All right. So that's how we go from fraction to decimal to percent. You can always go, if you're going from your fraction to your decimal or percent, you can make it to 100. If that doesn't work, always do top in, bottom out, guys. That is a foolproof, trusty method. All right. We're going to go over a couple more tomorrow because we have this lesson for 2 days. And that does it for me. If you are in Miss Peeler's class, please make sure that you're keeping up with her Google Classroom, along with, if you are in my class and watching this, make sure you're keeping up with the stuff that you have assigned to you in Google Classroom. So that does it. Have a great day, and bye.